For job seekers and change makers, this is the Green Jobs Pod with your host, me, Leonard Adler. For today's episode, we're honored to have with us Laura Thorne, who is the environmental career coach. I've had a chance to get to know Laura a little bit over the past few months, and we're actually going to be collaborating on an environmental career Q&A coming up later in April, which we hope folks will have a chance to stop in for. During these challenging times, I think it's more important than ever to be able to have some guidance, some advice to help you if you're looking for a job, navigate through the space. And Laura is definitely someone who has a lot of experience. So again, we're really fortunate to have her on the podcast today. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Leonard. I appreciate having the time to be here, and I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better over the last couple of months, and I'm excited to work on some things together, including this upcoming Q&A.
Yes, great. And so to start out, maybe just tell a little bit of the story. Here on the Green Jobs Show, we want to have people kind of share their stories. Everyone's story is unique, how they got into working in this space. And I know you have a distinguished career working. You've done a few different roles over the years. So if you could share with us kind of a little bit of your overall career journey, and then maybe eventually what brought you to founding the Environmental Career Coach.
Yeah, thank you. It has been a long and interesting road. And as you said, exactly, everyone's journey is different. Having interviewed 170 plus people on the Environmental Professionals Radio podcast, nobody has, no one's doing what they thought they were going to do. Nobody is, I graduated high school and this is what I was going to do. And now it's what I'm doing. It's all different. And I'm no different. I'm the same. I didn't go to school right out of high school and for environments. I actually spent a lot of time outdoors, but didn't realize that that was even a job you could have outside of being a park ranger. And it took me moving to a cold country, having lived in Florida my whole life, to realize that I wanted to work outdoors. That was my big epiphany. I don't want to be cold. I want to be in Florida outdoors. And then when I went back to the University of South Florida for biology, that was my big life-changing choice. It didn't have anything to do with interpersonal values, taking a strengths questionnaire, anything like that. It was just, I want to be a park ranger. Fortunately, I volunteered to be a park ranger before working as one and realized I did not like that at all. So I encourage anybody who has an idea of something they want to do to go out and try it as soon as possible, because it may not be the thing you think it is. But long story short, I ended up getting a job at a local government environmental organization in the Tampa area before I even finished graduating. It was, as it often is, I knew someone who knew someone and ended up working in the lab there. And then I got promoted using skills I had gotten in a completely different industry over and over. 8 years later, I hit a glass ceiling and I was going no further. And it was at that point where I was thinking, maybe at some point I should have thought about what else would I want to do or where would I go from here? And that started the journey into career coaching. At the time, I was the president of the Tampa Bay Association of Environmental Professionals, and I was working with a lot of students. And I realized that my coworkers, my colleagues, students, nobody knew what they were doing or what to do next. And so when I quit that job, or decided to quit, I had decided I was never working for someone else ever again. And I wasn't about to go back to school after facing the 2009 recession. So that's when I started career coaching. I thought some people need this help. People need to figure out where they should go beyond a strengths test. How do you figure out what you're interested in or what the options are? And it's been an interesting journey ever since. I've been doing this for like 8 years now. And the core basic parts of it are the same, but the challenges keep growing and the jobs and the job types keep growing. So it's interesting to see how it's evolved in the last, sustainability wasn't even a word when I graduated. Eckerd College was one of the first sustainability courses and programs, and they didn't start until 2009, I think.
Yeah. No, that's great. There's actually a couple things, because then we're going to talk about your work in the environmental career coach in a moment. But there's some things I just want to reflect on from the story you just told, because I think there's things that I think that would resonate with other people. So one of the things you talked about is you explored. And I think one thing when I talk to job seekers, I try to mention to them, be aware if you're in kind of an exploration phase, or potentially you know what you want, you're trying to go get it. But many people are exploring. And so to really encourage that kind of experimentation, because when you described how you went and you tried something and then you realized, okay, that's not exactly the thing, and then that helped you kind of adapt, and then okay, I'm going to go try something else. That's also to me really helpful. Just point, I think, for the listeners to kind of hear, because also the process of doing that, the more you can experiment, test, and reflect, and the quicker you can do that. So, for example, as compared to spending, $200,000 on a degree for something, and you don't really know what you're going to do at the end of that, and having spent all that time and money, the kind of the way you described how you, it sounds like, relatively quickly determined that one idea wasn't exactly the right one. That would be, I think, a great point for the listeners to be able to take away in terms of their own career journey. That's great. I'm just curious in terms of the whole process of starting it. Was there like a moment that you said, being a career coach, this is something I really want to do. It's a calling. Was it something that kind of gradually evolved through different experiences? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it was just something that felt like a need. I had colleagues who were asking me, how do I quit my job? I had students who were like, what do I do next? And just felt like at the time there were 5 other environmental sustainability, anything green type coaches. 5. The other day I saw a list of 40. So since COVID and now since the election, people are, including yourself, which is great, are jumping in to help. But I will tell you, 8 years ago, there was no one around to help. So I really felt that someone has got to do this work. And I'm not going to lie, I felt like, hey, I have these skills. I went and took a course on coaching, so I didn't just wing it. Like I learned, what do I need to know to do this? I had already been mentoring. Like I said, I was already working with students, but it was like, okay, how do I monetize this? I had business skills that I had picked up on my job. So I knew I had the interest and the skills to build an e-business. And so I just jumped and I just did it. And from my very first experience, it was like, I have friends now that are the first people that I coached, and I've seen them go through their first or second job and kind of change their whole lives. And so it's been very cool to see that. But in the beginning, it was just like, there was a need for it. And I'll very honestly say, I felt I could make some money with it. So, and
Yep.
I don't exploit people for their money. No one's ever made or given me very much money. My goal is to coach you 1, 2, 3 times, and then you know what you're doing and you're gone.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think your passion for your work clearly shows, and I think that's also a part of being a successful in one's career. Is there's going to be challenges, and so having that passion, kind of to help drive you and motivation, I think is great. And also, I think one way when I reflect on what you're describing is you saw a need, and basically you were trying to figure out how do you meet the moment that you see around you. And I think there's others of these moments right now. So I think for listeners, if you see a need, again, Laura, your stories where you saw a need and you just did something. And again, just like the other part we're talking about, potentially being a ranger, you did something, you kind of saw the response. And in this case, it was like, wow, it's a good fit. It's taking off. And, that sometimes the entrepreneurship kind of space will kind of give tips and advice very similar, Laura, to the journey that you're talking about, which
Right.
is you see kind of a market need, is there a way to monetize it? And you've got the capabilities to do that. I think that's excellent. And then also I think this notion of having kind of upskilling yourself, where you talk about getting additional kind of learning to help you be effective in that. I think that's also really good takeaway for listeners, which is it could be you see something out there and you want to do something, but it could be you need to invest in yourself so that you're going to be able to be successful in that endeavor. So again, I think there's so many I think it's not a surprise that you've been successful, because again, all of these kind of building blocks, if you're doing a session saying,
Right.
here are the steps you need to do, kind of you've been, kind of checking, kind of going through a checklist
Yeah,
to
you're
kind of
right. I've
basically,
lived
so,
it. And I appreciate that. I want to add on to the piece about learning. There are too many people that I talk to who are just taking what they have and trying to find something. You've got to be figuring out what you don't have or what the next thing you could add is, and keep doing that, because one, employers are looking for it. They don't want to hire
yeah,
someone who's just been kicking back and just applying. They
right,
want to
yes,
see that you're interested, and one of the ways to show interest is that you're continuing to educate yourself. And secondly, you might meet someone or find your next opportunity or learn a new passion, something you didn't know you were even interested in, by doing that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think just a couple things just to bounce off of that. So one kind of framework I try to share with job seekers is to be entrepreneurial. And we just talked about that topic a moment ago, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to start something. So obviously, your story is someone who actually, truly you are an entrepreneur. You started something. You've created your own business. But I think everyone should try to think about how can you be entrepreneurial in your career, which basically is what you described, which is how do you pay attention to new developments in your space, new skills to get. And obviously you can look at something like AI where, X numbers of years ago, if someone said, I need someone with 10 years of experience, well, that you couldn't have had that because that wasn't really the case. So
Exactly.
you see people upskilling in that area, just to give an illustration. So yes, I think this notion of being entrepreneurial, being proactive, I'd say it's as important now as it's ever been. And I think the other thing also you've shared in your story is the importance of networking as well. And again, I know you talk about that. I talk about that too. It's not only what you know, kind of the book learning, but it's also who you know. So things that you can do to help you build your network. And it doesn't have to necessarily even be explicitly, I'm going to a networking event, right? So you're describing there's things you can just by immersing yourself and being proactive, you're meeting other people, you're potentially building a network that can unlock things, down the road. So yeah, so no, all great stuff. So you've given us a little bit of a sense as to what you do, but just to maybe give people a little bit more detail as to kind of what is actually the environmental career coaches, what's the work you do, what are the services you offer to people who are kind of looking for potential support, in their career journey.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me share that. The environmental career coach, I started it, like I said, to help people who were looking for environmental jobs. It didn't have much of a boundary on that of what kind of jobs that entailed. If you're looking for something green, something that will help the planet, that's it. However, I have been a member, sometimes board member of the National Association of Environmental Professionals. And, there are people who have their PE degrees or certifications, they're wetland scientists, they're, professional environmental sciences, something like along that. Bugs and bunnies, lots of ecology. Sustainability fits well into that. I don't know what goes outside of that really. Anything green, maybe in the like super techie climate. When you say climate now, it means something different than green actually sometimes. So climate, even that was not around 8 years ago. People were not looking for climate jobs. They were looking for green jobs. So that's a different, which you might also know just from starting Green Jobs Network. It's different now. And but anyway, I've worked from people. My sweet spot is people who are either recently graduated, about to graduate, or career changers. High level C-suite, if you're looking for that, like head for a recruiter. I can and have coached people in that space, but sometimes they want more from me than updating their resume or just how to network, right? So there's more of the where you're at in your journey that fits with me because career coaching is 99% the same. It's the 5 to 1% that's different for environmental. I have a huge network, so often I can connect people to someone. I know someone they want to be an environmental planner. I've got a couple of people in my network that I can introduce them to or tell them some groups to join and make suggestions like that. But the rest of it, your resume, your cover letter, how to introduce yourself, how to network, that's the same no matter what industry you're in, really. and,
Yeah.
so I think that I can work with anybody, but the other big thing is they have to be ready. I've gotten better at this. When I first started, there were a few people I coached that they needed more of a therapist than a career coach. And I will circle back post-election. There are more people who kind of need a therapist within their career coaching, which is fine. There isn't a single person I've coached in the last 6 months who isn't dealing with some sort of mental effects from what they're looking at and they're facing in their career search right now. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that really answers your question, but really anybody who's looking for a green job, I'll work with you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, if someone were to come to you, so you describe things like helping them with what I would describe as the kind of nuts and bolts of applying. So, like making sure you have a strong cover letter, resume. But it sounds like there's other things you do to help people. Kind of, we're describing, people maybe in an exploration phase, trying to figure out how they fit into the space, for example, or if they've, maybe applied for things and haven't got interviews. Kind of, if someone's coming to you, what's the kind of maybe we'll call it the basket of things that you can do to help them?
Most people, by the time they come to me, they've been looking a while because nobody really wants to pay the money to see a career coach until they've already gone, wow, this was harder than I thought it was going to be. And so by the time they get to me, they're a little discouraged.
Yeah.
They're thinking like, is it me? Is it the world? Is it, the government? Like, how come I'm not getting hired? I thought I would. And so the first thing I want to see is, what is the reason? So, as a scientist, we're going to dig into looking at the source and find out, is it your resume? Is it your approach? Is it something that you're doing, or you just haven't? I mean, a lot of people I coach and we end with, keep doing what you're doing. They just need that reassurance that they've been doing the right things. That does happen sometimes, but usually I do have recommendations for their resume. So we just make sure that stuff is all buttoned up so you can stop worrying if that's the issue and focus on building relationships, taking some classes, figuring out where to spend your time and meet people. And then, so it kind of just depends. I might look at your resume and everything, go, it looks great. Now let's focus on networking. Most people, when I ask, how's networking going for you? Well, I don't know. Like, there's very, very few times that I've talked to someone who's like, oh, I love networking. I do it all the time.
Great. Yeah. I'm kind of, yep. I'm actually, I'd be one of those people actually. Always room to improve on the networking front.
Yes. The
Actually.
other thing about scientists and people in this field in general, everyone will say, I'm an introvert. Everyone says they're an introvert. I'm an introvert. I think all of us are introverts at times, but it's a skill that you build and it's something you have to practice. And then you say you can still be an introvert that knows how to network. That's completely valid.
Right. There's actually something I want to bring in because I've actually done running coaching. Running is one of my kind of side passions. I actually have done running coaching, and so one part of being a running coach is on the accountability side. It's helping someone. Let's say they have a training plan and they have to do the work on their own. You can't do the work for them. But one of the things one of the value points that a coach, the running coach, can do is to kind of help you stay on track with the plan that you have. I'm curious how that manifests in some of the work that you do.
That's a great question. And yes, that is also an area that I think most people need help with, myself included, for various things. And I have a couple different options of my services. So there's which you probably asked me earlier and I didn't answer. There's an online course. There's workbooks and a journal you can buy. So if you are an introvert and you just want to do this yourself, you can, and I provide these so that there are cost differentiations. You don't have to drop a ton of money to get my advice. You can watch the webinars that I have for free online. You can listen to the EPR podcast. You can buy one of my books that are less than $15, and then you can just get what I'm trying to tell people for cheap. And then my general online course that helps you build an action plan to help hold yourself accountable is pay what you want. You can pay $5 minimum to get this course. And maybe every chapter isn't relevant to you, but I will be sad if you told me you didn't get $5 worth of value out of it. So it covers everything from, some suggestions on how to review your resume accurately, how to rebuild it, how to do your LinkedIn, how to do and how to create this plan. And it has templates and spreadsheets and stuff to help you track what you're applying to. So you can hold yourself accountable in those ways. If you're the kind of person who is not good at holding yourself accountable and you already know that, then you probably would want to look for coaching. And to keep my costs down, I have one-on-one coaching that is just by the hour. You buy the coaching, I show up, I talk to you, and we're done. Well, then I just have the higher level that is my personal exclusive coaching, no more than 5 people at a time. And those people I meet more often. I send emails back and forth. So if you really, really need your hand held, I do have that option too.
Great. So for people, so it sounds like everything it's like the range from the do-it-yourselfers to kind of the more kind of full service in-person support.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, there was, I think I was, so just one thing I just want to acknowledge, because you've talked a couple of times about really how affordable what your offerings are. And I've worked in this space a long time, and, part of my own perspective is really wanting to make sure that these careers are accessible, that services to help people are accessible, kind of in that question of who benefits from the green economy. And so the fact that you make your services so accessible, I just want to say thank you, because I think the people who can benefit are important. And, I think it's a great service for this field that you're able, that you offer that.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And of course it's subjective. Somebody might look at my prices and think, "Oh my god, you're charging so much." But I promise if you go look at some of those 40 other people on the list now, some of them are charging insane amounts of money. I had someone message me last week and said, I'm sorry, can you help me? I got held hostage by one of these places and dropped a lot of money and I can't get out of it." I was like, I don't,
Mm.
oh my gosh, I don't know what to tell you. I'm
Right.
not that good at sales. I wish I was good enough at sales to convince someone to give me that much money, but I'm not. And and, and I can't. Like I wish I could do it all for free, but time is valuable and I live in New York City and I'm trying to travel and live my life. So it's in, time and expertise and just investing in yourself. For me, you have to know that you could do it yourself and find a job in 6 months, or you can hire a coach and get hired faster and then you have more income in your bank. So you have to look at it more as an investment in yourself than like, oh, I'm spending this money. And like I said, if you literally don't have it, there are other options.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, the point about, well, again, the fact that you offer this range. So if someone really wants to just do it yourself, totally fine. But I think it's important, kind of, from a holistic standpoint, that people's time is respected and valued. And so, as you said, you have a lot of experience. There's a lot of value. So your time is valuable. So the fact that you need to price it. So if someone is going to spend an hour with you, that totally makes sense, just 100%. So if you think about any field where if you're engaging with a skilled professional, you're going to a lawyer, you're going to a doctor, things like that. So, yeah. And I think the other part about it being viewed as an investment, again, and people will spend a lot of money on their, undergraduate degree, in instances or graduate education, things like that. So this notion of coaching as an investment in yourself and your career, again, totally makes sense. And so, yeah, so I think, with still acknowledging that, but still being able to offer things that there are affordable price points. That's kind of thing I just want to kind of call out and acknowledge, just because I've been in the space a long time. I actually grew up in New York. You mentioned you're in New York. So I grew up in New York. Family experience, for example, being on public assistance for a while and things like that. So this notion of making sure that things are accessible, kind of being aware of, who's in this space, who's not in the space, who can we make sure is part of this and is at the table, all really important. And so that this is kind of where rubber meets the road in terms of actually how you run your business. So again, just want to make sure I just want to make sure I kind of give a good acknowledgement to that,
Right.
because I do think those are the kinds of examples that I personally want to be able to highlight, want to amplify, because I do think that it's not just it's not just about working for a good cause. It's also what are the practices and principles in that effort. And so that's why, to me, it's being green is good, but also having kind of, again, this very well, I'll just call it like human centered, grounded approach to being a kind of being in the space, I think, is excellent. So yes. So actually, I think one thing want to be able to do too is, we've talked a lot about how, whether you call it pioneer, you've been in the space for a while and you've seen a lot. And I think, right now, more than ever, I think people are feeling very uncertain. They may be feeling very confused. I think there's also a bit of there's certainly anxiety. There's just a lot of things that are very, very challenging. And I've worked in the field also for a long time. I mean, I started this around the time of the financial crisis. Obviously, you and I both have been working through the COVID times in this space, but this is a very, very challenging time on a lot of levels. So, with that as a preface, I'm curious. I think a couple things, and we can take it kind of one at a time. First, kind of, I think the questions are kind of, what are you seeing, and then what advice would you have for people, given that. But we would just first talk about just things that you're kind of just seeing in the space right now, given the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say that anyone who's feeling anything, your feelings and your anxiety are real and validated. Like you're valid. You are allowed to feel that this world is kind of crazy right now, right? It's not the first time though that the world has been crazy. It's kind of always been crazy. I feel like growing up through like the 80s and 90s, 2000s have been very lucky that we haven't had major wars and we kind of had a really steady time, so we've gotten used to that. Um, but now we are in a time of unknowns, and that's exactly what causes anxiety. I don't know what's going to happen next. So there you go, valid. But the jobs are still out there. You're going to get a job, and it just might take longer or it might be a little harder. But it's kind of like, so I learned to ride a horse on a horse that would throw me off. He was beautiful, but he was a pain in the butt. And, and he literally, I would ride him and he'd be like an hour later, nah, I'm finished, and try to throw me off, and successfully did a couple of times. But let me tell you, if I'm not comfortable on any horse now, right? So you're going to get through this and you're going to find a job and it's going to be horrible and agonizing and whatever, but then you're going to be fine. So my advice to people is to focus on what happens after all this garbage. You're going to be fine. I've been through glass ceilings. I've been through layoffs. I had 20 jobs before I found a job I stayed at for 3 years. I've been through numerous horrible bosses. I've coached people into their dream jobs, and a year later, they're back to me saying, I hate this job. You don't even know that the job you're going to get is one that you like. So we get so focused on, I have to have this thing. Everyone else is getting a job. How come I'm not getting a job? And then something else happens and you're like, oh, that didn't matter anyway. So I don't know how that plays out into specific words of advice or wisdom, but it's going to be okay. That's all the more reason to build your network, continue taking learning, because the more valuable you make yourself in any situation, the more you're likely you're going to be able to stay. So that happened to me in the 2009 recession. I actually got my layoff papers. I was the last person hired in. I was the first person who was going to be let go. And, I'm sure I panicked in some way. I sold my car. I had a car payment. I sold my car for a cheaper car I didn't have a car payment on because I was assuming I wasn't going to be able to afford it anymore. Started job searching, but that's when I got involved with the Tampa Bay Association of Environmental Professionals. I went and started meeting people and I started getting involved. And turns out I didn't get laid off. Someone else who's a near and dear person to my heart for a whole different reason, which is a different podcast story, but he voluntarily moved positions to another position so there would be one open for me. So I stayed, but I stayed because I was valuable. If I hadn't been valuable and I hadn't been doing overtime work and I hadn't been putting in so much effort as an entrepreneurial spirit, they would have just let me go. But they wanted to keep me. So so my advice is make yourself valuable, build your network, and just try harder. it's got, like, you're going to find a job. It's just not easy right now. That's facts. That is facts. You might as well accept it and not fight it. And the last thing is, and this is not popular opinion with some people, but stop watching the news. Unless you want to be an environmental attorney, unless you are going into a space that you want to work for the EPA, a space that's directly affected, stop watching the news and just go about your day as best you can and look for what's out there. Because the more you tell yourself there's nothing out there, the more you believe it. If you tell yourself there are jobs, I'm going to find one, you will.
Yeah. I think the perspective that you shared, having seen recessions, different jobs, I think is so helpful because also, again, there's a range of people I'm sure who are listening to the podcast, but for people that this is the first time they're experiencing this kind of significant economic dislocation, they may not have as much perspective to draw upon. So I do think that's very helpful. And I've seen the dot-com crash, for example, as well. So I do think
I was laid off from that one as well.
Yeah. So I think that's partly how I've been thinking about some of the work that I do is to, you're basically trying to be a voice of reassurance. And also I think kind of a voice of stability when so many things, you prefaced your comments by saying things are very uncertain. And so that is for sure. And so I think being kind of a voice of stability, and then also, trying to communicate to people things that can facilitate their own internal kind of calmness or, regulation, i.e., for example, don't look at the news, right? If it's not going to be tangibly helping you. I think those are all very good pieces of advice from my perspective. I'm curious too, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think one thing that that I find is helpful to the extent that people can feel like they can control something. It can help their own, how they feel about things and also potentially their success in doing something. And right now, I think more than ever, people probably feel that there's so many things that are not in their control. I'm curious if there's any thing or two that you might suggest for people that, okay, here's something you can practically do while you're waiting to hear back from, employers, or while, waiting for certain other things to happen. I'm just curious on that front that can help people.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. I think that it kind of goes along back with, always be learning, taking a course, doing something, but you can control what you do with your time. So don't sit around watching the news, go out and volunteer, do something productive, do something. And, I don't have a therapist. I talk to ChatGPT. Let's be honest. That's my new therapist. And it tells me when I wake up with anxiety that you need to do something today that makes you feel good. So whether that's self-care, whether that is, incorporating a good lunch in with your job search. So instead of, I tell people is, if you are staying at home job searching, get out of the house, go to a coffee shop, go somewhere, go get out and do it, and don't just stay at home and the news on in the background. Like, do something that makes your environment feel good. Play good music. Do something, like, I know it's a painful job, but like, what can you do to make even having do that feel better? And if that means putting on some nicer clothes and getting out of the house and maybe only spending half a day and doing the rest of the day going for a long walk, whatever you need to do. But also, as far as things to be in control, actively following up with the things you're applying to, doing a lot more, maybe even more effort on what you submit. So a lot of people too are using a watered down method of applying for jobs where they're just throwing their hat in the ring, but that doesn't work anymore. When you're competing against 300 other people, half-assing it doesn't work. You have to put in the effort. So I tell people you can do that if it's a job that you kind of meh about, but if you really want that job, you can't do you that can't be your approach. So it kind of aligns with your question, but yeah, just do something. Well, it doesn't matter what it is. I can't tell everybody to do the same thing because what you like to do isn't what like someone else likes to do. But you can take control of your spare time and your mental health.
Yes, no, that's excellent. I just want to build on one or two things you said. So one is about volunteering, which I think can be a tangible thing for people to do. And just to give an illustration from another part of this overall climate landscape. So I have a law background, and so I've done some collaborations with someone who runs the Planetary Lawyer Project, Matt Carmel, who's a prior guest. So he's actually putting on a full day. It's like, or I think it's 2 days, pro bono boot camp. So one of the things he talks about for people that are interested in using their legal background to get into climate, because you might not have started there, but that's where you want to end up. He encourages people, for example, to do volunteering, which in a legal space is pro bono. So for those who are interested, or even if you're just curious, it's free. It's 2 days. So that's coming up and later in April. But just that's a tangible. And he actually tells part of his own story of how he arced his career. It started out just by, I think he actually was just doing some volunteer, legal work, and that led to more and more and more. So again, you never even know what volunteering can lead in terms of future career unlocks. And the other thing, because you've talked about networking a few times, I do want to just mention part of that doing something. I'm actually in Green Jobs Network trying to share more events. So in addition to sharing jobs, sharing events, and obviously career events, always try to share those, but other events as well. So, I know we're all familiar with things like New York Climate Week, right, which takes place in the fall. But nowadays, I've seen more and more cities doing climate weeks. And so like I think LA has one, SF, we've got one coming later in the month. DC is going to do their very first one in a few weeks from now. That's actually going to have a big job fair component to it and things. So those are examples of things to just get, if you're going to just get out, right? You can get out and go to an event in one of these climate weeks, or maybe if your city doesn't have one, go find some friends and start your own climate week in your own city, for example, right? So anyway, so those are just a couple of things I wanted to add to
Yeah,
that.
that's a great example. I've actually had one of the people I coached took my suggestion to start a group and started a climate career group in Chicago, and they have over 200 plus people at their meetings. I've gone there and spoken to them. They're awesome, and he is he's like overnight was super well connected and loves the job that he has now and everything. So that's the other thing is, when you talk about being entrepreneurial, sitting back and applying is only going to get you so far. But seeing an opportunity, whether that's just starting a volunteer thing that no one else did, there's grants, local grants everywhere too. Get a grant to do a cleanup, get a grant to do a planting or something. There's a lot of opportunities to get out and be doing what your goal is to protect the environment, and at the same time feel like you're making a positive difference and look good on your resume.
Yes. Yeah. And circling back to something you'd said, kind of how you started the environmental career coaches, you saw a need. And certainly when it comes to the environment, there's plenty of need. Climate change is not solved. There's needs in the environment. There's plenty of needs. So yes, I think, and you just have to find out what need resonates with you. And as you were saying, just get out and do something. So that's excellent. So I'm going to ask like a final question too, but before that, to the extent people have been listening without saying, certainly we're going to have show notes, so you can look up links and things like that. But for those who are simply listening, so we can make it easier for you, how do people actually look you up to get access to your services?
Well, one of the best things I ever did for myself was to choose the environmental career coach as the name of my company. It's kind of hard to miss it. If you Google environmental career coach, it comes up first, usually. So, yeah, I'm online. I'm on LinkedIn, Laura Thorne, Laura J. Thorne, I think. And you can email me at Laura at the environmental career coach. I'm on Instagram.
Great.
I'm everywhere. You can find me.
Great. And just the domain, just so it's theenvironmentalcareercoach.com, right?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. Great. And then, so just to wrap things up, so again, it's been great talking with you. It's actually, the time's been flying. So I think more just wanted to say if there's any other things you wanted to add that we haven't covered that you wanted to share, just want to give you a chance to do that as we wrap things up.
Sure. Thanks again for having me here. And I'm looking forward to our Q&A on the 25th. So we probably should just mention that the number of signups has been insane, and we're still trying to figure out what are we going to do with that. But we'll hopefully see you in some capacity on the 25th.
Totally.
But final words of wisdom. I just, after this many years of starting off as an artist with no direction to an environmental scientist with a great career, but then smashing my head against the glass ceiling and having to figure it all out again, there's some sort of balance between having a direction to go in and then just being curious about where it ends up, and not focusing so hard on holding on to what you want it to look like or think other people should think it looks like. Don't worry about what your mom thinks about what job you get. My grandfather was insanely disappointed when I quit my government job, but he didn't understand my world as a woman in that position. So you have to hold on to your own vision and focus on the impact you want to make and less on what that looks like specifically.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent way to wrap things up. So yes, and as you mentioned, Laura and I are going to be doing an environmental Q&A on April 25th. So again, hopefully we'll see some of you all there. So again, thanks so much, Laura, for spending time on the Green Jobs Pod today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Green Jobs Pod with me, Leonard Adler. For more tools to add to your toolbox, check out Green Jobs Network at greenjobs.net. Go to greenjobspod.com to submit your questions and ideas for the podcast. The Green Jobs Pod is produced by Jubilaria Media. Your brand has a story. Jubilaria can help you tell it. Level up your content strategy and click on the link in the show notes to schedule a free consultation.